Today, let's write expressions for the volume of figures. Remember, expressions means equations. So let's look at these figures. What do you notice? Well, the dimensions are the same for the two figures. So I notice that this 5 is the same as this 5, the 3 is the same, the 8 is the same, this 5, the 3, the 10. So our dimensions are the same. Also notice there is a blue prism and an orange prism in both figures. The blue prism is shorter in the figure on the left. The orange prism is longer in the prism on the left. So do you think the pictures show the same rectangular prism? Yes, they look the same. I can use the given dimensions to calculate that they are the same. So the only thing that appears different is where they divided the figures at. So here they've divided it right here. Here they divided it right here. So let's find our volume for each of these and prove that they are the same figure. So on this one, let's look at the bottom rectangular prism. So my length is 10. My width is right here. So this would have to match this. So my width would be 3, and my height right here is also 3. Length times width times height. 10 times 3 is 30 times 3. We're going to take off that 0. 3 times 3 is 9. Put the 0 back at the end. So this volume for this one is 90. Let's look at the top one. Okay, so we have our length would be here. Well, that's not marked, so where could I find it? Well, it has to match the top. So my length would be 5. What about my width? Well, this width has to match this width, and it has to match this width. So we know this width is 3, and our height is 5. So we have length and the width and the height. So length is 5 times width in parentheses times height. So we're going to do our parentheses first. 5 times 3, 15 times 5 equals 75. So this volume would be 75. Now we're going to add those together. 75 plus 90 165 would be my total volume. Okay, now let's look at this side. Orange prism. Okay, what about my length? Is that 10 the length? No, the 10 is for the blue and the orange together. So that means that this length has to match this length. So that means it would be 5 for my length. My width, well, there's nothing there. So let's see where I could find a matching width. Well, it would match up here, just like in the last one. So that would be a width of 3, and our height is here. So I have a length times width in parentheses times height. 5 times 3, 15 times 3 equals 45. Okay, now let's look at our blue one. All right, length. Well, it's missing, but it has to match this top one. So it has to be 5. So this blue and this orange would equal my 10. So that would be my length. What about width? Well, that's going to match this width. So that's going to be 3. And what about my height? Is the 5 the height? No, that's just here. So my height is here. So 8 would be my height. So your equation for the blue would be length times width in parentheses times height. So 15 times 8 equals 120 for my blue one. So now we're going to add those together. 120 plus 45 equals 165. So this is the same as this. So even though they have divided them differently, your volume is still going to end up being the same. Okay, so now we're going to write an expression to represent the volume of this figure in unit cubes. Okay, so where do you think we would divide it? Okay, I might divide it right here. Okay, so my length is 3, my width is 3, and my height is 5. So I've got length times width in parentheses times height. 3 times 3 is 9. Bring down what you haven't done. 9 times 5 is 45. So 45 is the volume for this one. Now let's look at the back one. All right, so some of it's covered up on my length, so let's go up here because remember the top has to match the bottom. So let's look up here for the length because the top has to match that bottom. So the length is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Length. The width is 2. And the height is 5. So I have length times width in parentheses times height. 5 times 2 is 10. Bring down what you haven't done. 10 times 5, take off that 0. 1 times 5 is 5. Put the 0 back at the end. 10 times 5 is 50. So 50 is the volume for this one. Now we're going to add them together. 45 plus my 50. 1's place 5. 10's place 9. My volume would be 95 for the entire figure. So remember, in order to find volume of a figure composed of 2 right rectangular prisms, we divide it or split it, and then we find the volume of each of these rectangular prisms, and then we add them together.